Beverly Brown, and you're watching Action 5 News out of Houston. And today I'm delighted to have back as my guest, Artemisia Dong Song.
Thank you, Bev. Thanks for having me. It's actually dawn song, like the rising sun, not like dong song.
Oh, so a little bit like dim sum.
Kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We love Chinese food here at the station. So, I heard you wrote a new book since you were last on our show, Chickweed, A Natural Cure for Every Known Social and Political Ill. How pertinent.
Yes, it was really a birthing of our times. I was on a writing retreat in Bali, and I was just really struck by all the pain of our modern times of war and poverty. And I just thought, what could I do to help? And I was just like this divine downpouring. It was just like so clear. Chickweed will just relate all of that. It's the answer.
Seems like chickweed is maybe the answer for all of the problems in the world.
Totally. Yes.
Good to know. Well, I am just so excited to be talking about herbal syrups with you today.
Well, I am equally excited, Bev. I'm very honored to be asked back to the show. So I'd like to begin with smudging. And this is some white sage from my garden. And this is going to really bless our medicine and create a sacred container for this medicine making.
Like a takeout container.
Well, a little bit different than that. Like a container, like a space, when you get into that zone. Like that. Like a really tranquil zone.
Smoky.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
That's it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we have the container sealed and all of that, let's talk about herbal syrups. So to begin, for all of our watchers out there, what are herbal syrups?
Great question. So herbal syrups are usually a sweet kind of liquid that you take. They can be based on sugar or honey or glycerin. Today we're going to make a honey-based syrup. And so the first step is making our herbal infused honey.
Sounds delicious.
So I brought some different honeys for us to sample. And these honeys, they can be taken by the spoonful just as is, or they can be added to your tea, or they can be the base of an herbal syrup that you make. A lot of options.
Wow. So quick question for you. I see in the store things like tulip poplar honey, sourwood honey. Now, are those infused honeys too?
Well, that's a great question, Bev. Those are actually honeys that are made from the flowers of those plants. So the nectar of the tulip poplar or the nectar of the sourwood. So they're not infused with those plants, but they're actually made from the bees make them from the nectar of those plants.
Okay.
Yes. So this is a little bit different. The herbs have infused in, you could use sourwood honey, you could use a varietal honey like that, or you could use kind of a wildflower honey or a more sort of generic honey that's not a specific type. And the reason that I like honey as a base to my medicinal syrups and then also as a solvent for this medicine is that honey has its own medicinal virtues. So honey in itself is anti-inflammatory, it's antimicrobial. It's also helpful when you have a dry hacking cough, the kind of cough that will just keep you up at night. So it just can help to soothe that kind of spasmodic coughing and coat a sore throat. So a lot of these wonderful qualities of honey are married with the medicinal virtues of the herbs themselves.
How wonderful. Well, let's give these honeys a try.
Super. Hawthorn honey, as you'll see, it's got a nice fruity flavor and a little bit of a sour flavor. And hawthorn is just such a wonderful medicine for the heart. It's a cardiotonic, and also it's helpful to open the heart. So energetically we use it for grief and loss. So this has made from the fruit of hawthorn.
Beautiful. That is delicious. So fruity.
Good. The second one we have is Angelica honey. And this is one of my favorite herbs for syrups and honeys because it's just got such a nice spicy flavor, which is lovely blended with the sweetness of the honey. Yeah, so Angelica,
Wow.
nice herb for coughs, and it's also anti-inflammatory, really helpful for arthritis, and a wonderful digestive. And so this is a nice one you could put in your chamomile tea or your peppermint to just help with digestion.
Wow, it is amazing how different those two taste.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's go next with spikenard honey. So spikenard is the root of a native plant that is again, spicy like Angelica, but it's very wonderful for thick, stuck lung mucus. So just when you just are coughing and having trouble, you can feel something's in there, but you have trouble expectorating it. So spikenard's wonderful for that. So then we have elecampane honey, and this is probably my favorite herb for honeys and syrups. So elecampane is also helpful for kind of thick lung grunge, and it's also a wonderful digestive aid and has that nice spicy flavor. So this is a great one to warm up and add extra spice to your herbal chais in the winter. And this honey, by the way, is almost 10 years old. So honeys that are made from dry plant material, and we'll get into that a little bit later, are actually very shelf stable and can keep for decades. And you may have heard of how honey can keep for millennia. So it is very shelf stable.
Wow, so that links back into its antimicrobial properties.
Correct.
Wow, now I want to know how many calories is in this honey.
So then we have elderberry honey. And so the elderberry honey we're going to be making a little bit later today. And this is a great one for kids.
Okay.
Because it's super fruity and yummy, and you can use it to mask more bitter flavors. And again, it's very antimicrobial, antiviral, antibacterial, great for colds and flu and coughs.
So you could use one of these instead of getting a cough syrup from the store. You could make one yourself.
Exactly. So instead of buying elderberry syrup or elderberry honey or even a pharmaceutical cough syrup, you can make your own herbal cough syrup.
How fun.
So we're going to start off by making an infused honey. And so we are going to make a honey with elderberries. So you can see here, these are frozen elderberries from last summer. They're not in season yet this year. So these are frozen elderberries and they keep very nicely. You could also use dried elderberries, or you could use fresh elderberries that weren't frozen. Now, if you're going to make your honey from fresh material like this, it's going to dilute the honey and the honey won't be as shelf stable. So usually I like to make my honeys from dried herbs. This is a little bit of an exception just because the fruitiness of the elderberry, I really like it either fresh or frozen, but you can, like I said, make it from dried elderberries. But any of these honeys, I would instead say to make them from dried herb material, and that's just because the herb, if it's dry, won't lend any water to the honey, because once you dilute the honey, again, it's not going to keep as long in it. And so this elderberry honey will need to be refrigerated or else it can grow mold.
Okay, good to know.
So the first step, what we're going to do is we're going to measure out, in this case, 12 ounces of the elderberries.
Now I remember when we were talking about infusions and decoctions that the ratio was much different. So this is a 1-to-1 ratio.
That's right. This is much more concentrated than making an herbal tea, because when you think about an herbal tea, you take a whole cupful. With the syrup, we're talking more like on the teaspoon level. So we're making a much more concentrated medicine.
Okay.
So here we have a homemade double boiler. And so you can buy an official double boiler or you can fashion one yourself. Super simple. A smaller pot is nesting in a larger pot with water in it. And this will help to moderate the temperature because we don't want to burn our honey. So we have 2 mason jar lids there to help keep the inner pot risen up off the lower pot. So this is just a homemade double boiler. So we're going to put our 12 ounces of elderberry, and then I'm going to measure out 12 ounces of honey.
So quick question, we're going to do this on the stovetop. Is it possible to make honeys without heat?
It definitely is. A lot of people like to just this whole first step, mixing the honey with the herb, and then they just leave it in the cabinet and let it infuse for a month or 6 weeks and then strain it. What I find is that honey is somewhat thick and viscous and not necessarily the best solvent, so not necessarily the best at extracting. And so if I can heat it up, then it becomes thinner and I feel like it accepts the medicine more graciously. So we are going to heat it up, but we're just going to keep it on very low heat. And the other thing about heating your honeys is it makes it much easier to strain. Honey, when it's cold, it just really will not go through the cloth very easily, but when you heat it up, it becomes thinner and it's much easier to strain. So now we've got the elderberries and the honey, equal parts, and then we're going to put this on the stove and we are going to let this go for about 6 hours. So the longer the better, and then we will strain it. So that is the first step in making your medicinal syrup.
So now we have time to go to the gym.
Yes. So the second step is making your water infusion. And so basically we're making a really concentrated tea. And so we're making equal parts herb, equal parts water, like the honey. And so here I have 12 ounces of water that I have boiled. And then to that, we're going to add 12 ounces, again, of the elderberry.
I love that color. I think this is the color of the year this year.
It is this sort of plum anthocyanin color.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's how they're describing it in the fashion magazines.
Definitely antho.
Anthocyanin. Just such a high fashion word.
Yeah, it's more catchy than plum or eggplant. So now we're just going to let this infuse for 20 minutes. So we're making the super concentrated tea. So just kind of to recap, we're going to make our honey infusion that's going to slowly simmer. Then we're going to add our water infusion, our really strong aqueous extract. And then the third part to the syrup is some elderberry tincture. And so this syrup has 3 equal parts. It's 1 part elderberry honey by volume, 1 part water infusion, the very strong aqueous extract, and then 1 part elderberry tincture. And so that way, with this syrup method, you have water-soluble properties, you have the energy and the medicine of the honey, and then you also have the alcohol-soluble properties, and you're also going to make a product that is very shelf-stable and can last for years.
How cool.
So let's say you wanted to make a syrup and not have the alcohol. If you have someone that's avoiding alcohol, or you don't want, if you have a very young child that you want to give alcohol to, you can make a syrup with just the first 2 steps. So you can make a infused honey and the infused water extract, combine those 2. Once you have them combined, though, you're going to have to refrigerate it, and it will only keep for about a week or 2.
So it's 6 hours later. Artemisia and I went for a nice workout at the gym, and then we went and got green juices. And now we're back to put our syrup together.
So the first step, we're going to take our infusion and strain it. So this is the water portion of our syrup. And look at that, the berries are just this kind of grayish color. They've given up all their lovely color and medicine to the water. So for this, I'm just going to give it a little squeeze with my hands.
And so this is just like a tight weave muslin?
This is actually some kind of a cotton gauze fabric that you can get from the fabric store, and so it has a little bit of a looser weave than muslin, and so it strains easier, I find. But you could use a cheesecloth with a tighter weave like they sell at goat cheese supply companies, or you could use muslin and just try to find some that's just got a little bit of a looser weave so things strain easier. So now for this syrup, we're going to use 10 ounces of this infusion. We're going to do 10 ounces of water extract, and we're going to do 10 ounces of honey and 10 ounces of tincture. So here's the 10 ounces, and we're going to put it in our syrup bottle. Now we have some extra infusion here. What do you think we should do with this?
I think we should drink.
I think so. I think we could mix this with some sparkly water.
Ooh,
that would
delightful.
be yummy. And put it in some smoothie. So now we're gonna strain our honey. So this honey's been going for 6 hours and it's still warm, which is really crucial for straining, because if we let it cool, then it wouldn't go through this cloth as easily. All right, so to get every last drop from this, what we're going to do is put it in this thing right here, which is a potato ricer. So this has these nice holes, and then it's just a little press, and we'll really get every little last drop out of it. So we're going to scoop up the elderberries back into the ricer. And if you didn't have such a thing, you could just wring this with your hands or kind of fold the cloth over and press it out with a spoon. So you don't need this handy little thing. You could get this from any kind of kitchen store. So we'll just press it, and you can see it's getting out quite a bit.
Wow, look how much more is coming out of there.
Ooh, it's squirting all over the table.
It's kind of explosive.
All right, so there we have our honey. And now for this honey, we can just put this aside and label it and keep it in the fridge. We're going to pour out 10 ounces of this. Get out every little last drop. And we'll pour out 10 ounces. Now, if we were pouring this out to store just as a honey, we'd want to make sure everything is dry and clean. We don't want to add any extra water weight. And so now we're going to add that 10 ounces to the water extract. So now we have the water and the honey portion of the syrup, and the next step is to add the tincture. So this is elderberry tincture. This was made with fresh elderberries. So this is made with 95% and fresh elderberries, but because the elderberries were fresh, they diluted the alcohol. So this is probably maybe at 75% alcohol or so. And so now we're going to add the tincture portion to our syrup.
And so this has all been equal portions.
Right, so equal portions of the strong tea, of the honey, and the tincture. So now we have 30 ounces of the syrup, and we can shake it up, mix it up, label it, and I would just store this in the fridge for extra measure if you have the space. If you don't, you could keep it on the shelf. This probably has maybe 25% alcohol in it, so it will preserve nicely. If you had a tincture that you had made out of vodka and it was lower alcohol, then you would have like 15% alcohol, and that wouldn't be shelf stable, and you would want to refrigerate this. And if you were making it with like a lower alcohol tincture like vodka, then it would keep for maybe a year.
Okay, let's talk a bit about dosaging.
Great.
How much of this do you take?
So it depends on the herb that you add to the syrup. In this case, with the elderberry, the dosage would be about 1 to 2 teaspoons 3 times a day for an adult that weighs about 150 pounds. So 1 to 2 teaspoons. So let's look at 2 teaspoons is about 10 milliliters or 10 dropperfuls of the syrup. And so you would be getting about 3 dropperfuls of tincture or 3 dropperfuls of alcohol in that 2 teaspoon dosage, which is really not that much alcohol. And if you're concerned about it, you could evaporate the alcohol by taking some boiling water, putting a little bit of boiling water in a cup, and then add your syrup to it. Let it sit for about 10 minutes, and about 60% of that alcohol would evaporate.
So what about for children then? How does the dosaging change?
Good, that's a great question. Well, so first thing with children is that we never want to give honey or a honey-based syrup to a child that's under 1 year old. And that's because there's a chance that honey can have botulism spores in it, not necessarily live bacteria. And for the immature digestive system of babies, it can actually start to grow and make them sick or worse. So just to be on the safe side, we shy away from giving honey to babies under 1. So older children than that, we just need to adjust the dosage to their weight. So I like to use weight to determine the proper dosage for children. Let's say the dosage for a 150-pound adult would be 10 milliliters or 10 dropperfuls, which is about 2 teaspoons full. So we have a child that weighs 50 pounds, so that's 1/3 of 150 pounds. We're going to use 1/3 of 10 dropperfuls. So we're using about 3.3 dropperfuls of the syrup. Now, of that 3 dropperfuls, about 1/3 of that is alcohol. So the child is receiving about 1 dropperful of tincture with every dosage of syrup, which is pretty low alcohol. And again, if you wanted to evaporate that off, you would end up with only about half a dropperful of tincture per dosage for a child. So now I'm going to demonstrate how we can make a quick syrup for an acute health condition. And this is a wonderful way to mask bitter flavored herbs for children and other people who don't necessarily want to take some really strong tasting herbs. So what we're going to do is take our elderberry honey as the base, and then we're going to mix different tinctures into it. And this is a sample formula for a productive cough. So this will just help to loosen the phlegm and help to expectorate it. So we have elecampane, spikenard, usnea, and echinacea. We're going to add those in equal parts to the honey. So we're going to make 4 ounces of syrup, and we're going to use the honey as the base. So we're going to add 2 ounces of elderberry honey, and so that's our base. And then we're going to add equal parts of each one of these tinctures. So we have 2 ounces of all the combined tinctures, so we're going to add We divide those 2 ounces by 4, so we'll add half an ounce of each one of these tinctures.
So it ends up being half honey, half tincture combination.
Exactly. And so this is technically a syrup as well. And it's one that you can take by the spoonful. The alcohol won't be too strong. And these herbs will help to loosen the phlegm and bring it up. And there's also a lot of antimicrobial qualities and immune stimulating qualities in these herbs. A lot of people like to give glycerin to children and use that as the base for their cough syrups or tinctures, but I am not a fan of glycerin, and so I prefer to use this honey base. Now, sometimes you might have to warm your honey up a bit so it will dissolve the alcohol, but this is dissolving nicely. So we'll add this to our 4-ounce bottle. Now, if you didn't have a beaker on hand, then you could just mix this up in a little mason jar or cup and then pour it into your bottle.
If you're using safer herbs, could you just eyeball it as well into a jar?
You could, and with any of these herbs, you could kind of eyeball it and go for the dosage. Now for this is a little more of a concentrated syrup than the first syrup that we made with the elderberry. So an adult dosage of this syrup would be about 1 teaspoonful or 5 dropperfuls. And so for every 5 dropperful, you'd have 2.5 dropperful of the tincture combination. So that would be to wrap your mind around how much alcohol a person's getting or how much tincture they're getting. It just helps when you know a half of this syrup is tinctures or alcohol-based extracts.
And so is this something you need to store in the fridge as well?
This is shelf stable because it's going to have enough of the alcohol that you can just keep it on shelf.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited for everyone out there to be making your own honeys and syrups, such a delectable way of giving medicine and savoring our wonderful herbs.
Thank you so much for being here, Artemisia. It is a pleasure as always. So we're going to send this story now out to our field reporter, who's with a very special palm reader named Muffin. What makes Muffin so special? Well, she's a dog. Seems like chickweed is maybe the answer for all of the problems in the world.
Okay, let's cut right there for 1 second.
All right, straight face.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
When you get into that zone, like that, like a really tranquil zone.
Smoky.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's it, huh?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Bye, Artemisia.
See you later.